It's time now for Countywide, a special presentation of Yavapai Broadcasting News. Join Paul David and Jen Cohen as they talk with our community's leaders, newsmakers, and people in the know. You'll hear about the hot topics that affect all our lives in Yavapai County. And now, here's today's Countywide.
Welcome to Countywide. I'm Paul David. As always, it's great to have you in studio today. We're going to get an update on the Prescott National Forest with Fire Staff Officer Pete Gordon. Welcome back, Pete.
My pleasure.
At least twice a year we have you in,
Yep.
At least twice. And it's this time of the year, and I think actually this year probably having you in earlier than we normally do. I would think April, early May is probably when we typically have you in.
Correct.
But we have had a very lousy fall, winter. We've had nothing from September through January. February, we've had some storms, which has been nice. We've got another one coming up on the approaching weekend where it's supposed to be, I think it's a 40% chance of showers Saturday afternoon right now and a 50% chance through Sunday. So that's good news as well. But I thought we'd have you come in early this year because the wildfire season is pretty much, we say there's no such thing as no wildfire season, right, in Arizona. There's always a wildfire season.
Sure.
But I feel like this year it's going to be early. And I feel like it's going to be extreme. What do we have? Coconino National Forest had a 335-acre wildfire on Tuesday afternoon. Yep. And this is mixed in with snow and rain and everything else that's been going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how was the winter for the Prescott National Forest?
As far as precipitation, it was a terrible winter. You know, as you pointed out at the beginning here, we haven't seen any moisture really from the end of the monsoon season there in early September all the way through January. It was the end of January, mid to end of January, we saw that first storm. So tremendous deficit in the amount of precipitation we would see. So there's no moisture getting in the soil, and with that, no moisture getting in the vegetation or the dead material on the ground. And the two combined just makes for priming the fuels, as we say, priming the vegetation for a pretty robust fire season. And what we've had in the last 4 weeks, it has certainly put a dent in, as we were talking before we got started, we were seeing fires across Yavapai County and other places in Arizona in January, mostly grass and small intensity fires, but fires nonetheless that ordinarily we shouldn't be seeing. So this latest moisture certainly in the last few weeks has put a dent in that, but nothing, I'm confident in telling folks that what we've seen so far is not anything that's going to put a dent in the intensity we're likely to see this summer. Yeah,
I think the One Less Spark campaign is one to keep in mind on because Chino Valley, they did respond to a fire where there was a guy out cutting grass, hit a rock, and there's the spark, and so that was January. I know Central Arizona Fire and Medical, they've had a couple of brush fires. We just mentioned the Coconino National Forest had their fire this week, 335 acres. And there's been 2 wildfires down in southern Arizona. And they're typically kind of the sign of what's happening, right? We start watching the southern part of the state, we can say, okay, it's drying out, and pretty soon all of a sudden here's the Prescott National Forest, you're next in line. Yeah, so that's happening as well. They've had a couple of big fires down there already. So let's not talk about wildfire season so much. What was Prescott National Forest able to do? Because we tell people to create defensible space. I know the Forest Service has been trying to create defensible space around communities. So how did that go over the winter months?
We've been successful on the Verde District side. So we've done a lot of great work along the 169 corridor and I-17 corridor and east of I-17. We've done a lot of debris pile burning, several thousand acres of that, as well as broadcast burning in the chaparral and pinyon juniper country. Unfortunately, just because of these conditions, it has been too dry in the pine type. So up on Mingus Mountain, where we had projects planned for the winter and some of the projects around the Prescott Basin, we just haven't been able to. We tried in October and again in November, and already we're seeing too dry of conditions. The very first storm over the Martin Luther King holiday in January, we tried burning piles on the Prescott side in the pine, and we found that those piles were moving under the snow and causing a lot of issues for us. You know, no resource damage per se, but it was an indication it was too dry. It was requiring too much attention, where ordinarily when we burn piles in the snow, they don't require a whole lot of attention. So that was one of our first signs that things aren't good, and it just has not improved. The moisture's not enough.
Now that right there, that surprises me, but that should be a true warning sign to everybody, I think. If you're out in the forest or anywhere where there's grass, even your backyard right now, the grasses are brown, but you've got fire burning underneath snow.
Yes.
That's pretty amazing.
Yep. Yeah, and what we were seeing, particularly of interest, were the larger diameter materials, some of the logs and big limbs that were buried with 3, 4, 5 inches of snow. Once they were ignited by a debris pile, it would continue to creep under the snow, and then by that time drying out some needles under the snow, and it would carry right underneath the snow.
That's crazy.
To the point our folks were out there for a few days digging through the snow to dig and mop up like we would a normal wildfire.
That is nuts. That is nuts.
Yeah.
Maybe we can do this real fast. I was talking to George Josens with the Coconino National Forest yesterday, getting some sound from him for the story about the fire, the Kendrick fire. And he was mentioning that the grasses are 1 hour fuels.
Yes.
And he said very plainly, he says the grasses can be wet in an hour, but then they can be dried out in an hour. So there's different fuel types. Maybe we just hit that really fast, but the grasses are the 1 hour fuels. So if you live in a grassland area and it rains, you can pretty much expect that once the rain ends and we've got the winds in the spring, that within an hour of that time frame, that grass is going to be ripe to burn even better than it is when it's wet. So what are the other fuels, and how long do they last and take to dry out?
So you've described it very well. Typically on our fire behavior side and internally when we talk to the firefighters and fire managers, we're looking at 3 categories of fuels, and it's based on size and that size of fuel, its ability to exchange moisture with the atmosphere. And so we call them by an hour or 10 hour. So we've got our, the 3 main ones we use are the 1 hour fuels, as you've described.
The grasses,
okay. And needles.
Okay.
It's the small diameter material. We also refer to our 100-hour fuels, which is anywhere from maybe a 1/4 inch to an inch or so in diameter. And then we talk often about our 1,000-hour fuels, and that's 8-inch diameter material or larger.
Okay, so you got grass, sticks, and logs.
Yep.
Okay.
And as you may guess, the larger it is, the longer time or the longer lapse there is to exchange moisture. One of the things that we know about the environment, all of the vegetative material, especially the dead material, is constantly trying to catch up to or equalize with the ambient moisture in the air. So it's this constant cycle, up, down, up, down. So if the air becomes moist, fuels will try to catch up to that. If the air becomes dry, they try to release their moisture and dry out. The 1 hour fuels, they are called that because it takes less time, give or take an hour, to react to a change in the moisture of the atmosphere. 100 hours take a little longer, 1,000 hours a lot longer. So if this is making sense, we tend to look at the 1,000 hours to help us with our trends. Since they take longer, if we see the 1,000 hours starting to decline, it's a good indication there hasn't been a whole lot of moisture in the air, moisture on the ground or in the soil for these logs to absorb. And we have been seeing 1,000 hour, up until February, we were seeing 1,000 hour fuel moistures that we would typically see in May. And that was because of months and months of no precipitation. Those 1,000 hours were releasing the moisture they would contain ordinarily.
That's scary.
So,
that's scary. We'll take our first break, okay? Prescott National Forest Fire Staff Officer Pete Gordon in the studio today. Stick around. Countywide. We'll be back in just a couple minutes.
It appears these hot ashes are about to be dumped, which could possibly start a wildfire. How will Smokey deal with such a hot situation? The garden hose defense. Next, a thorough stir. Then another spray. And finally, feeling if the ashes are cool.
Oh, yeah.
Ah, yes, the selfie. A ritual practiced so frequently with this tribe, but not so much by Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Being prepared is a part of who you are, but it's especially important in the case of a disaster. Be informed about possible emergencies in your area. Make a plan that covers where you go in an emergency. build a kit with the things you need to survive. There's no one more capable of planning for your situation than you. Start your plan today. Go to ready.gov/myplan.
Welcome back to Countywide. We're talking about the Prescott National Forest, getting an update from Fire Staff Officer Pete Gordon. We were talking about storms off camera just during the break there, and we were talking about just how every storm is pretty much the same. You've got the wind, and with spring coming, we typically see a lot of wind, and we've been seeing more and more wind lately, too. Wouldn't you agree?
I would agree.
Over the last few weeks.
And I would expect more, as it's very typical for us in the spring.
Yeah, storms start with wind, like tomorrow. We're supposed to have 25-mile-an-hour winds. They back the winds down a little bit for tomorrow, which is nice. But then Saturday, here comes a storm. And it's going to rain and rain and rain through Sunday, and then Monday we've got a slight chance of showers, and then we've got wind throughout the whole thing. So I think we get a false sense of security because it rained.
Right.
But then with all that wind mixed in with it, it just doesn't seem to get a chance to really soak in.
Yeah. One of the things that we teach a lot of our firefighters, well, all the firefighters at some point get this education in fire behavior and weather. Wind, not only does wind push the direction of a fire or increase the speed of a fire, but if you can picture it, also introduces oxygen to a fire. But one of the things that we don't necessarily associate, but we certainly teach to the firefighters, but good for our public to understand, the wind, as we were talking about the size class of the fuels, the 1 hours, the thousands, the hundreds and thousands, wind also wicks moisture away. So without wind, certainly there's a rate at which they would try to exchange, the fuels try to exchange moisture. Added wind and a higher wind just accelerates that exchange. It wicks the moisture out of the fuels.
Well, it makes sense. If I got a wet T-shirt on, I go stand out in the wind. It's not going to be a wet T-shirt for very long. Let's switch gears a little bit. Are there any concerns, any particular areas of the Prescott National Forest that you really had hoped you could have gotten to over the winter months that you just weren't able to get to? That I mean, we have to be careful no matter where we are, but there are areas that are more dangerous than others right now. Sure.
You know, one of the things we're proud of is we've done a lot of work around almost all of our communities across the whole county that abut the forest. But of course, as I described, you know, in our pine type, it's been a difficult year. It's just been too dry to where, had we gone in and done some prescribed burning, we probably would have seen results we didn't want. You know, mortality in some of the trees or just too much damage to the soil, so we couldn't afford to do that. Areas of particular concern always is around the communities, and as I mentioned, we had some areas planned south and southwest of Prescott, the Spruce Mountain, Spruce Ridge area. There was a particular prescribed burn we were hoping to have conducted in October, and just too dry. So that is on the table until conditions rebound. The good news is that we have 20 plus years of history of doing work all around the south and west sides of Prescott, and the weather has not kept us from doing some of our mechanical work, the mastication with the big equipment that comes in and chews up the brush, and some of our thinning work, both contracted and in-house folks doing the thinning work. So that continues, and thankfully the weather has not been an impact on that.
All right, very good, very good. Let's switch gear again. With the wildfire season, I've heard that maybe we're gearing up a little bit earlier this year and being prepared, because we, before the show you mentioned that, you know, April is going to be a kind of a key month for us. March is looking pretty good. We're starting off with a little bit of rain right now. We had a few storms in February, so we've got these little Band-Aids that keep coming, it seems like on the weekends, which is great on the weekends to have that happening. But do you see wildfire season starting earlier this year, and is Prescott National Forest gearing up for it?
The answer, I'd say 2 yeses for you there. At this point, unless we see a lot more precipitation in the next 30 to 45 days, I think we'll see a little bit earlier onset of the fire season. I say that a little bit relaxed from where I would have been had we doing this interview in early January. I was very alarmed in January that it might be one of the earliest years where we would have to look at restrictions. But at this point, I'd still say early, but we're in a little better shape than we were 45 days ago. But right now, all indications are it just has not been enough, and I would not be surprised if we start to see a little uptick in early April as opposed to later April where we typically have. What we're doing at a regional level, not just on the forest, but at a regional level, we started having discussions and made decisions early in January. We're going to bring on, I think, 5 of our 13 hotshot crews in the region will come on early, some of them as soon as mid-March. The Prescott hotshots will have them on the 1st of April where they typically come on in mid-April. So that's occurring. And of course, doing everything we can to get training done so the folks are ready to roll. We have a lot of folks on board now. We'll get a boost in our seasonal workforce in April, but a lot of our folks are on early. The permanent seasonal workforce is on early and gearing up, getting ready. I guess the state has put a little more funding towards wildfire prevention this year as well. I know the governor put out some cash to so like I told you, we started our wildfire PSAs March 5th, which was just this past Monday. So that's a good sign. I was going to ask you too, are we doing anything to, because if you ask the local folks, it's like, well, it's not the locals that are starting these fires, it's the visitors that are coming up out of the Phoenix area. But is there plans and to advertise around the entire state? Certainly. It's something that we discuss all year round. There's a meeting coming up. Forgive me for not knowing the dates right off the top of my head, but in the next few weeks, there's a statewide coordination meeting with Arizona's Department of Forestry and Fire Management and all of the forests, the fire programs. That's a meeting where we'll coordinate not only the prevention message, but the response. We'll start discussing our coordinated responses. So that's ongoing always. We have a pretty good network from Arizona and New Mexico of all agency, public affairs, and public information, fire information officers are well networked, and they're already gearing up, looking at prevention plans and talking media releases. Locally, I've had discussions already with some of the fire chiefs and the state looking at doing joint messaging, opportunities to get a joint message out, which we've done in the past. The big one this year is Ready, Set, Go. Yeah. There's been a lot of talk of Ready, Set, Go. I'm getting it from all over the state, and we've had, I think One Less Spark was not last year, but the year before we started the One Less Spark message. We've got the Defensible Space message, so if folks aren't familiar, One Less Spark, don't drag the chains, make sure your car's in working order, because it literally is a spark. It literally is a spark that can start the fires in the state of Arizona. So there was the One Less Spark campaign. Of course, never throw your cigarette out the window. And then Defensible Space, try to, if possible, on your property, have 30 feet of clear space around your home. So if a fire does creep up to that point, it's got nothing to fuel itself. Get wood piles away from your home. Don't leave things out on the patio. Get the leaves out of the rain gutters. Trim back limbs from the roofs. I got this stuff down, Pete. Excellent. I've got this stuff down. And then this year, the big one, the whole state came together. Were you guys part of this as well? Forest Ready, Set, Go? Yep. I think the whole state is on board with this one. It sounds like it. I know at least it was a countywide effort initially, but there may be efforts across the state. Arizona wanted its own message of Ready, Set, Go. Ready, get your things ready that you need, your 6 Ps. Boy. Yeah, I know. But the most of them are pets, people, pills, papers, your pictures, and your personal computer. Yeah, that's 6 right there. Yeah, so that's, you want those Ps ready to go. So that's your ready. Set, have them someplace so that if you have to, you can just pick them up and go, including your pets. And then go is when YCSO, the sheriff's office, comes and knocks on your door and says, hey, there's a wildfire coming, you need to get out. You're ready to go. So that's the message this year. So we'll be talking more about that throughout the month of March as well. I'm trying to get emergency management to come in and do a little something on that. So wildfire season is going to be, we have to take a break. Oh my gosh, we got to take a break already. Okay. Prescott National Forest Fire Staff Officer Pete Gordon in studio today. Stick around, countywide, back in just a couple minutes.
This is Bruce Morrow, Transportation Manager for Cottonwood Area Transit. Remember, we cover the entire Verde Valley and Sedona. Cottonwood Area Transit has you covered wherever you want to ride in the Verde Valley, all day, every day. Take Cottonwood Area Transit through Clarkdale, Verde Village, and from 26 locations in Cottonwood. With Verde Links, it's a quick and easy trip to Sedona every day. Don't forget our connectors to Camp Verde. Visit cottonwoodaz.gov for Cottonwood Area Transit and take a seat. Let's go ride.
what to expect when you're expecting.
Like here?
A teenager.
Today, I'm going to show you how to teen-proof your home. First step, hide the car keys. Preferably somewhere they would never look. Challenges will come up. Be ready for them. Hi, honey.
Ready for the... Mom, you don't use mannequins in the mannequin challenge.
You don't have to know it all to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same.
If you don't fix them, sparks from dragging tow chains could cause a wildfire, and that could be scary. Hi, Smokey. Only you can prevent wildfires.
Welcome back to Countywide. Great to have you along. We've got just a couple minutes left of the program, and we were talking about the slogans that you hear now every year. One less spark, defensible space, and ready, set, go. And Pete, you said they're all very viable.
Yeah, I think they're all still appropriate. And the way I think of, and the way I would like to describe it to your audience is they're phases. And the first one less spark is, that the idea of being vigilant, pay attention to what you're doing. Any heat sources, spark sources, pay attention to the conditions, and consider not doing certain things that could start a fire. Next phase is what you can do to protect your property, and more importantly, what I say is what you can do to protect the firefighters so they can do something to protect your property, and that's defensible space. So phase two is if the fire's already happened due to something else, you've done your vigilance, one less spark, but somebody else started a fire, you can at least defend your property or make it defendable for firefighters to defend your property. And then that third phase is, okay, now it's too late. You've got a large fire, a Goodwin fire, for example. Be vigilant and be ready to go. Have a plan at the beginning of the summer. Don't wait for the Goodwin fire to start. Have a plan. How are you going to go? Who are you going to call? Get your stuff together, the 6 Ps. Have that plan, and then go. And maybe not wait for the sheriff to knock on your door. Go a little sooner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. That's good. You're right. That all three messages do apply. And I would even wait for summer. I mean, I'm ready now.
Yeah.
I'm ready now. Just watching this year and how it's gone, and you hear Flagstaff is 70-plus inches behind on snow this year. They average 120. They're 70 behind. Yeah. That is really scary. I don't know the numbers, and I don't think you knew the numbers used, but the Quad City area also way behind on moisture. Everybody's way behind. Navajo County and Apache County are both in extreme drought conditions, and you were saying Yavapai County is
in the last couple of months
racing towards that too.
From moderate to a few places of severe in Yavapai County, and so. The last message I would say is even if we continue to get a little rain in the next month or two, I still think the deficit is so great that none of us should be surprised at a robust fire season. It may be shorter, but I think the peak of the fire season could be fairly robust just because of the deficit in moisture.
Do you think maybe with it being as bad as it is this year and people are so aware that it was so awful this winter that maybe we have a heightened awareness among the public?
I'm always optimistic that that's the case, and I think we've seen that. It's hard to necessarily prove that, but we have had seasons on the tail of a large fire like Goodwin. If memory serves, I think the year after the Gladiator fire, 2012, so 13 was a big year, so I take that back. But there have been years where I think following a large fire in conditions, we've seen a downward trend in human starts. So I think there's a correlation.
It's sad. I think, I think the correlation is, I think we get a big wildfire going on and people are like, oh, wow, look at that. That does happen. And then all of a sudden it seems like it quiets down because, I mean, literally the media is bombarded, the public is bombarded, firefighters are bombarded with this massive wildfire. And it's just in everybody's face constantly. But, once it's gone, we tend to forget about that. But we've got to remember, because last year we did have the Goodwin fire that evacuated Mayer, Springerville, all kinds of places down there were evacuated for several days. I think it was about a week's, total about a week of time went by. And so, and then Slide Fire, Yarnell Hill Fire, we've had so many wildfires that have just been so devastating to the area that we all need to be diligent. So
and I think let's have a memory. And so it occurs to me it was 2014 where we went into restrictions early. We had a very dry winter, and we came off of the Dosey fire and the Yarnell tragic fire in Yarnell. 14 was a quiet year. So I would ask our folks, let's have that memory of catastrophic fire and terrible conditions, and be more vigilant.
Yeah, let's be quiet. Pete, thank you so much for
pleasure.
coming in.
My
If
pleasure.
you need something, let us know, as always. All right,
Thank
that's today's Countywide. Thank you so much for watching and listening. We'll talk to you again next time.